Hey everybody, I'm Amanda with DevExpress and welcome to today's webinar, Create and Customize Beautiful ASP.NET Websites, presented by DevExpress Web Program Manager, Mehul Harry. In this webinar, you'll learn how to customize the DevExpress webmail demo to take a good user interface and improve on it, or maybe just customize to your own design preferences. Thank you so much for joining us. I will now hand things over to Mehul Harry.
Thanks very much, Amanda. Good morning, everyone, or good evening, wherever in the world you are. And today we're going to cover creating and customizing beautiful sites with DevExpress ASP.NET products. What got me to thinking about this and what I was really excited to show you was that recently Mark Miller and I just did a small video together. Now, if you go to our YouTube channel, you'll find a video that we just posted about this. It's called the Expressway Tour Edition, and it's under videos. And this is a talk Mark had done. It's loosely based on his Science of UI, and it was actually a long talk, so we just condensed it down to the best parts. But Mark has a keen eye for user interface and how to make things better, not just from the perspective of colors, shapes, contrast, and so forth, but also in how data is presented and what parts are important. And so what happened was at the end of this talk, I invited Mark and I said, Mark, how do we make something even better? So we got into a lot of different things. And in this video, Mark and I actually just looked at a couple of aspects. But there was so much more that I wanted to present to you here today, a couple of those other items to take a good user interface, make it even better. Now, I did say create. Now, creating with DevExpress ASP.NET actually is really easy. I mean, that's one of the things you buy DevExpress ASP.NET products for, to get a really good-looking user interface like this, or for mobile like this. And to do that, really, you can go about it one of two ways. You can just start by using DevExpress from File New, or you can take one of our existing demos. And today, the demo I'm mostly going to focus on is the webmail client. Now, webmail client, and if you didn't see how to get to this, you can just go to devexpress.com and look for demos, the ASP.NET demos, and you'll find this under ASP.NET demos. But essentially, this webmail client demo is based on a lot of the webmail demos out there, like Outlook.com or Hotmail or Gmail and so forth. And our main purpose wasn't to make a mail client, but to show off how you can make a beautiful user interface that uses a grid view with all these capabilities for grouping and sorting and filtering and so forth, and also a tree view or a menu, buttons and so forth in an HTML editor. But and if you haven't seen this video yet, don't worry, I'll just quickly cover a couple of the points in there. One of the first things is, you can look to, when you look to create a beautiful website and customize it, what you want to, you immediately think right away, hey, I'm going to look at the design of it. Now, for sure, in the latter half of this webinar, we're going to look at how you change around colors and fonts and so forth. But there are things you can do to data that can have a big impact. And this was one of the things that Mark suggested that him and I talked a lot about in that previous video. But to sort of summarize what was said was, he said, listen, when you've got data, and depending on the kind of data that you're presenting, it's important in how you present it. So in this case, we've got email, and he says, a grid view is great. In fact, a grid is a fantastic thing, but sometimes it's better to present data in a different light depending on what kind of data this is. So he said, listen, one of the first things I would suggest is that I might not even use a grid view for this. He says, for example, right now, the grid is great, but because these are emails, I probably want to present them in a different way. So Mark suggested to me an idea. Now, people always ask me, what's it like to work with Mark Miller? Well, Mark is a very direct person, meaning, so when he gets an idea, he's like all gung-ho for it. And he says, listen, this is the way I would present it, right? I would put the subject up top, I would put the from name here, the attachment here, the date down here. And I said, okay, well, now if you ever worked with the grid view long enough, you'll know that that's what's known as the card view. Now, to show you this, let me bring up the DevExpress demos. Now you can get to them by going to demos.devexpress.com/ASP, or just going to the DevExpress.com website. Now I'll click on the grid view and I'll quickly show you what I mean about the card view demo. Now this essentially lets you lay out however you want in terms of the data representation. So in this case, we've got a table where we said we've got first name, last name, and so forth. And this is great, and it comes with some advantages and disadvantages, which I'll quickly cover. But essentially, this is just a template. Now, this is what the code looks like for this demo, and we'll be doing this in just a second. But essentially, it uses a template, customizing the data row template. But when you do this, it no longer uses these columns. It's going to use the layout that you define. And here we've got an image with a label and so forth, and it uses an eval statement. So let's do this. Let's implement Mark's suggestion and see how that looks, right? So to get to this look, what we're going to do is work on the webmail client demo. Now, to work on the webmail client demo, I'm going to first open it up. Now, every DevExpress every DevExpress demo comes with a full source code. Now, it's installed in your users public. I'm logged in as Mehul, but it's under public because of the IIS requirements, the local IIS Express requirements. And under DXperience 13.1 demos, and I usually put a link to this, direct link to this in their favorites. And under ASP.NET, C# or VB, I usually use C#, and you'll find the webmail client. Now, under here is the full demo, everything that's used in here, everything from the styles, the themes, the app data, the code, and so forth. And I've already opened this demo up. Now, I haven't touched this demo. It's the exact same one that you'll find in your installation. The only thing I've done is I went to the default ASPX page and went to the design view. I went to the design view to show you that essentially this thing uses a grid view, and it's using some master pages as well. Well, what I'm going to focus in on is this default ASPX page here. And this default ASPX page contains our grid view, the mail grid, which is what we want to change around. So from the Smart tag, I'm going to click on Edit Templates. Now, in the Edit Templates, you'll see a ton of them. So you can customize everything in the columns, each of the individual columns, all the way down to the edit form, the detail row, the footer, everything. And we're going to focus in on the data row. Now, in the data row, I've got this template here, and what I want to do is I'm just going to insert a table. Now, I don't have to use the designer here. In fact, I can do this all from the source view as well. So as we can see, we've got this little setup. So what I want to do here is, as we saw in the demo, as soon as we go to set up a template for the data row, we are no longer using the approach that we had inside of the previous setup. So what we want to do is set up statements that reference the previous items. So in our case, what I'm going to do is use eval statements to get at the subject and the other forms. Okay, so to do that, let me first bring up a page here. And what we're going to do is the very first thing, according to the image that Mark suggested for us, was that we want to have subject up top and an attachment icon on the right. So that's what the first row will contain. So in this cell, we are going to evaluate a statement and call the subject field. And then on the bottom side, and by the way, if you're wondering what this NBSP is, that just stands for non-breaking space. It's not really necessary. I just tend to leave it in there in case I want to put some text afterwards or something like that. So the good news for us is there's already we used a data item template to represent the attachment icon. So I'm simply going to take this little bit here and add it to this portion here. All right, so now we have an image icon as well for the attachment. Now, I tend to want to save on keystrokes, so I will make a cut and paste real quick and simply put in the other two items. And here we want to add in the other two, the from field and then, of course, the date field. So this will represent from and this will represent date. All right. Now we have essentially the two items that we were looking for. So we'll save this and Visual Studio catch up here. And now I'm going to view this in the browser. All right. Now, the first thing is, I should mention, while this is loading up, let me give you a quick overview of this webmail client demo. If you're not familiar with this demo, I highly recommend it. We did a lot of work, in fact, in the last release. Between 13.1 and 13.2, we did a ton of work to improve this demo. Because initially we liked the demo a lot, but it didn't really show off the beauty, the performance of the DevExpress controls. And I also wanted to focus on making it responsive. So if you've not seen this demo, for example, if you run this on iPad, what'll happen is it will automatically resize. So what happens is, as you resize this, as you lose real estate, you saw that the splitter collapses this tree view and this menu items on the side and gives you these little buttons. But if you go to full screen, it realizes I have enough real estate. So, we tout a lot about how mobile friendly our server controls are, and this is one way that you can support them. So while you can get touch, you can also now get the capability to say, look, you know what, I'm going to make my site smart and have it do this. And it's also got a ton of beautiful themes that are built into this. So for example, it's really not my preference, but if you like green, you can go green. If you like orange, or I tend to prefer some of the new Metropolis colors, like Metropolis Blue, or the standard Metropolis is also very nice. And these are based on the new Windows 8 Metro look, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a sec. All right, so the webmail client, my local version, now has this other look. So let me first set this up side by side so we can see it better. All right, so here is the original look, and here is this look. Now, the very first thing I notice is that, I don't really need to group information, because now that I'm showing this information in this other light, it's not really necessary. And I want to make sure I've got some padding in between some of these rows. So let me do that. Let me disable grouping, get rid of these column headers, and see if we can improve the look a little bit more. All right, so to add some padding, I'm simply going to add a little div here, and that adds a padding, and make sure it's also aligned properly and closed off with the div. Now, to turn off the grouping, I can simply set up a different. I'm sorry. I can simply disable it from the design side, or I can also simply remove the settings property for the group panel. So I'm going to set that to false. But I'm also going to make sure that now I can group by date. It's already sorted by date. So if we take a look here, we've got a group index on this column. So I'm going to remove that. I'll leave the sort order. All right. Now let's save this. I don't really need to recompile because this is going to get already recompiled on the server side. So let me just simply hit this page again. All right. So just by doing a couple of things, by adding padding and removing the grouping. Now I can also remove this column headers to make it even a little bit better. Now I've also noticed that, you know what, these dates are not quite fitting in, so maybe what I want to do is right align them. So there's probably some more space there. But as you can see, I can do things. But immediately I will say that Mark was pretty much on the money. Mark was right that in this case, this card view probably works out better. In fact, it probably works out really good for the mobile view as well. Now, this isn't always the case, and it really depends on your data. Now, for example, I will say that this grid has a lot of benefits. So for example, we had to turn off grouping. So in this case, we can still group here. Now, we don't have to turn off grouping, but just group. It makes sense to not have a group panel when you're displaying in a card view. So, like I said, the advantage is with this data, this looks better, but you may want to turn off certain features if you really want to just say, look, this is, as a developer, this is how I want to show you the data because it's more meaningful to you in this case, and so forth. So, you know, you have to kind of pick and choose your battles, and this is what, in design, you have to make these tough decisions. So what I want to now focus on is a couple of other things we did in the demo. I'm actually going to go away from this card view because I actually like this other setup better, because I think we can take this approach and make it even more interesting. So let's do that. Let's go back to this view, and I'm going to show you a couple of things a couple more things you can do with the data that I think will give you a big advantage as well. All right, so the first thing is, let's just put the group information back. So I'm going to just hit undo here. Let Visual Studio catch up. So we'll set that back. We'll set the group panel back. And to remove the template, I'm just going to delete it out here. All right. The very first thing is I'm going to save this and make sure that we have gone back to the original view. Oops, and we got to be careful when we refresh the page. All right, so to refresh the page, if you're wondering what I'm doing, I'm just simply going to the URL, hit enter, which just simply reloads the page rather than sometimes refreshing the page if I've done some action that it's looking forward, if it's looking for some stateful information for. So now we're back to it. So the first thing I want to do is I want to change around the way these dates are displayed. Now, if you're not familiar, we're going to use what's the Gmail style of dates. Now, Gmail, what they will do is if today was February 25th, in fact, let's make this full screen. If today was February 25th, what Gmail will do, it'll simply not show the date and only show the time. Now, this can become really meaningful when you want to show information to the users and say, look, you can get an approach to displaying data that's very meaningful. So let's drop the redundant info. And Mark suggested this as well. And he said, look, we can do a lot to this UI. Just for example, on the grouping, why keep showing the word date? It's already up here. I know it's grouped by date, so just show the date that you're grouping on. So we can do that. He says, let's remove this style and go for Gmail style dates. And his thing also was, when it is grouped, it tends to box this. Because we've removed the horizontal grid lines and only have the vertical grid lines, he said, look, either I would put in all the grid lines for both rows and columns or remove them both, right? Instead of just having vertical grid lines. So let me show you how to do that and how easy that is. All right, so to do that, first of all, to remove the grid lines, it's super simple. Now, I tend to want to work a little bit more on the source side, just because Visual Studio tends to work a little bit faster on the rather than the designer sometimes. The designer some days is very fast, and some days it's has its how do you say delays and so forth. But in this case, what I'm going to look for is grid lines, and because I know I've already set it to vertical, I can set it to both, but I'm going to go for the none option. I really like the idea of having no grid lines. Now, the other thing is the group format. Now, for this, I'm going to show you in design view. Now, if I go to properties, and for the grid view, we're going to go down. I'm going to look at settings, and here I could have set the grid lines here as well. The group format has this option that says, look, when you show the group, the 0 represents the column name, and 1 and 2 represent the values, not the values, but the names of the other columns. So I'm going to set the group format to remove the name and just show the value. So let's save that. And finally, what I want to do is I want to change around that dates to show Gmail style dates. So you may be wondering, well, how do you do that? How do you customize how the data is done? So I'm going to go to this website called search.devexpress.com, and I use this a lot. I just set the technology to ASP.NET, web forms or MVC, select the product. In this case, I'm going to set it to grid view. And I want to know how to set custom display text for a column. So I search by that. And the first option it comes up with is this help file for how to provide custom display text for data cells. That sounds exactly like what I want to do. And this example demonstrates how to display the empty string when the units on order column sales contain 0 values, meaning that when it's 0, I don't want to actually show 0, I want to show the word empty. And it's got this event, custom display text, and it gives you this event args that has the capability to tell you what field name, what the value is, and what the display text is. Now that looks exactly like what I want to do. So let's do that. Let's look at the event for the custom display text on the grid. And I see under rendering, we've got a lot of different options. And under custom column display text, there's already this event that's been overridden. I'm going to double click on it. And I see there's already a bunch of work happening here that says, look, if it's subject field, do something. If it's from field and so forth, we're going to do it for the date field. So I'm going to say if the column dot field name is equal to date, then I want to do something to it. Oops. So the very first thing is we want to figure out is if it's today, I don't want to show the time. So in our case, what we're going to do is first grab the value, right? All right, so in our case, let me first I want to do is grab what that value could contain. So let me make sure I've got this closed off properly. And I'm a big stickler for tabs and spaces here. So first thing is I'm going to make a datetime variable to grab the date value, because the e.value simply returns an object. So what we want to do is, as you can see here, it's saying, hey, this is an object. It's not a date time. So we're going to have to parse this using the datetime parse method. Now, you want to be careful. Now, also, it's looking for a string, so I'm going to have to send it the toString option. So the first thing is, you're probably looking at this and going, hey, wait a minute, what if I don't have a datetime that's being passed in there? You know what? You definitely want to make sure you handle this. You might want to do a try catch, and in which case, if it isn't, then maybe if you want to set a, sometimes there could be null values in the database, there could be empty values. Now I know, for example, in my case, there is a value in there. So I recommend that when you do this, you want to handle for those situations. All right, so next is, once I've got the value, next thing I want to do is I want to check, okay, is the case, is it today? So datetime is such a great variable that it lets you get at certain parts of it. So date.val, you know what, I'm just going to change this to uppercase so it doesn't look like date eval or dat eval, sorry, yeah, dat val dot date. So it's got different components of the portion that you can get access to. For example, day of the week, day of the year, date. So I'm going to look at the date portion and see if that is equal to datetime dot today dot date portion. And if it is, then we're only going to return the time. Now remember, there was a variable called e.display text, and we're going to simply set that to return the date value. And datetime is such a great thing in .NET that they give you a ton of overrides for how you return the string. So I can return the long date string, long time string. I'm going to return the short time string, and this essentially returns, for example, like 7:28 p.m. or something like that. It's just a very short time string. And if it is today, that comes in very handy. So in our case, we're simply going to set the display text to return this. All right. Next is we're going to return the, if it is not, then we want to check for one other thing. All right, so let me simply compile this and get rid of that little error statement. All right, so the next is, if it is not today, then it's either going to be this year. So I want to make one other if statement that says, look, and by the way, I'm going to show you another better approach to this. This was sort of the first pass to this, and I kind of want to take you down this path that I went on, simply because as developers we tend to do this. We tend to say, look, here's one approach, but sometimes there's a better question to ask. So we'll get to that in just a second. So I said if it's to date, then we're going to get the short time string. But the other cases, I want to know, is it this year? So I'm going to check the date val's year property and see if it is not this year. So I'm going to say date time dot get the year portion today dot year. And if it is less than this year, then what I want to do is I want to set the display text to show the full date without the time. So in this case, we'll set it to show to short date string. So this will show you a date that's similar to, for example, 12/10/2013 or 2012 or something like that. And the else statement will simply be that this is equal to it's either this year. Now I could have just said, look, if this is this year, you know, it all depends on how you want to set up your if statements. There's many different ways. Maybe you want to use a switch statement, whatever you prefer. In this case, what I'm going to do is set the display text to equals date val dot, and in this case, I'm going to set it to thanks, Frank. He pointed out that for some reason I keep putting two equal signs. Been working a lot with JavaScript, and our CTO Julian is a JavaScript expert, and he's always big on like $3 for the evaluate statement. So, anyways, let's stick with good old C# here. And in this case, what I want to say is that if it is, then I want to simply set it to a custom format. Now, so in this case, I'm just going to use toString and display a custom style. So in this case, I'm going to go month and day. So this is going to show you a date, for example, like July 13th. Because it's this year, I don't need to show 2013 or something like that. I'm just going to show that style of date. All right, so in essence, we've got the setup. So let's compile this, save the whole thing, and redisplay this. All right, so the very first thing you'll notice is we've got those Gmail style dates, right? So February 25th, and if it's last year, we've got this date. Now, you might be asking, well, wait a minute, how can I tell if it's going to show the time? So, you know, I'm a little bit lazy. Rather than go and change around the database, I tend to just change, because it's on my local machine, I'm just going to change the date time. And you got to be careful when you do this, and I'll show you why in a second. But let's change this to February 25th. Okay, and now when we refresh this, it's showing us that, look, it recognizes today is February 25th, so I don't need to show that. I'm only going to show the time. Now, as you can see, I really, really love this approach. It's so simple, it's so striking, and just in a matter of seconds, we've got this, right? Now, what this is called is, well, Gmail also uses this approach, but they also use an approach called relative dates. Relative dates means that, for example, this is today. So rather than show the time, maybe we can show what's called a human date. So there's this big movement right now on called humanized dates. And if you're not familiar with it, you know, there's a bunch of libraries out there. The one I tend to recognize. Oh, by the way, let me. As I mentioned, taking that approach where you change your system clock, this is where Google says, listen, the certificate you have, your clock is showing February 25th, right? And today is not February 25th. So Google's saying, hey, listen, I don't like you doing this. Now, this will happen on anything that you go to bing.com and so forth. Once it recognizes that its certificate is expired, it'll see that as well. But anyways, I'm going to go to GitHub directly, because there's a lot of GitHub doesn't like it either. All right, so let me just change the system clock back here. Adjust the date time. Change settings. Update. Okay. All right. All right. So the way I found this library was I went to google.com and let it. Let's just go back to good old Firefox here. And I simply said, look, let me find a Gmail style dates. And that led me to what's something called relative dates. So I said, okay, well, let me find how to do .NET relative dates. And eventually, when you go down this path, and I'm just kind of walking you sort of the approach that I took, and I found that there's what's this movement called humanized dates. Now, there's a lot of ways to do this. Now, there's JavaScript libraries for it. And what I ended up doing, and I said, well, let me find the .NET approach to this, right? In fact, I think I said ASP.NET. And I landed on, in this case, it's not finding it so easily. There is this Moment.js. I tended to find this one called Humanizer that works very well. It's a GitHub project that you can find. In fact, let me just, oops. It's a GitHub project by this gentleman named Mehdi K. The reason I'm directing you to this is it's very easy to get started with this. So instead of writing all that code I've written, what we can do is simply call the install package for Humanizer. And what's great is it gives you extension methods for humanizing strings, humanizing enumerations, and even dates. It even gives you other approaches for doing metadata and so forth. All right, so let's see how easy this can be, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply comment out this little bit of code here, bring up the console for NuGet, and while it initializes that PowerShell host, all we need to do all we're going to do is call install package and say Humanizer. And what it's going to do, it's going to go out there to NuGet and grab all the information for that package, put it in my system, and then all I really need to do is add a using statement and then simply modify this little statement here. All right, so we've got it successfully added. The only thing I need to do now is say a using statement here, using Humanizer, and then we'll simply modify our statement. All right, so the first thing is, I still want to make sure that I check for if this is the column name is equal to date, but now what I can do is I've still got this date eval, and so what I'm going to do is simply set the display text equal to date eval dot to date eval, and it should give me humanized now because we've added that using statement. So this is a datetime variable, and humanize is available because we're using that package, so it gives us extension methods on top of base types, which is fantastic, right? So now we're simply going to save this, recompile, and refresh our information here. Now, I tend to like this approach, but a simple way to get some meaningful information can be this. All right, so I've done it again. I apologize. I just really love these double equals for some reason. All right, so let's recompile and all right, so you'll notice that humanize, while it's very cool, gives you very different style of dates. Now, if I change it to today, it's gonna. If I change the date time again, it will simply say today, and for example, something 3 days ago, it will say like 3 days ago, and so forth. Now, I like this approach, right? Because these obviously are meaning. As humans, we read these dates better. They make more sense to us, right? Oh, that was 5 months ago. That was 6 months ago. Sometimes that's useful. Sometimes it's not. For example, depending on the type of analysis and data that you do with a grid, your users might say, hey, listen, I still need to look at the actual date. I'm glad you give me this friendly human date. So in that case, you might want to put something like a on mouse over event. That's when they hover over this event, that you actually show the actual date, right? Or for example, if they click into this row, you can show a pop-up or something like that. So this is one of the things you can do. Now, the other things we did was we removed those other the vertical lines. So now this information is also more meaningful because we can see that this all belongs together because it was part of maybe the most recent date, which is what we're grouping by. And if we were going to do it from, it would be listed by from. Remove that little bit as well. Okay, so next thing I want to move on to is sort of the design aspect of this project, right? And by the way, let me post this link inside of the questions here. And if you're interested, I will send it to everybody. So that's a very nice little library. All right, the next thing I want to show you guys is Outlook.com. Now, if you haven't not seen it, it's actually very interesting. This is what Hotmail evolved into and so forth. And honestly, you know, Hotmail got beaten up a lot because they said Gmail was so much better, et cetera, et cetera. I think what they've done with Outlook.com is fantastic. I'm still a big Gmail fan as well. But you know, you can see that you know, they've improved it a lot in terms of performance. For example, what we've done with performance here, it's really fast. But also, they've gone for a Metro style look here, you know, with the icons and so forth. But also the fonts are very different and the colors. And to be honest with you, when I asked Mark, I said, Mark, you got this eye for UI. He says, honestly, I like this. He says, while they've got this look that's very nice for them, he says that this Metro look is also very good. But I said, okay, so I said, Mark, you necessarily wouldn't change it. And he says, no, not in this case, based on the type of data we have. So, but I'm going to go ahead and show you how to design something if you've got something in mind. Or maybe perhaps, your boss says, look, I really like Outlook's colors with the gray and the blue, and I want to have a similar thing. So, we can see that a lot of elements are similar. For example, they got email here, we have email here as well. They can't do, for example, grouping. They can do some sorting, but their grouping is a little bit different, right? We can group on any of the columns. They're doing it by a certain set of columns and so forth. So, what we're going to show you is the simplest things that you can do can have a big effect on your UI. So the first thing I'm going to show you is how do you figure out, let's say we wanted to get the colors, right? Let's get this blue and gray in here, right? How do you do that on this type of demo? Well, the first thing is you want to first figure out what this color is. And I tend to like to use the browser tools. Now, they're called the F12 tools because if you hit F12, it'll bring up generally the built-in browser tools that let you look at the pages, performance, but also its elements and source and so forth. So I'll simply right-click in this area and say Inspect Element. I tend to like Chrome's tools a little bit better, but they're all really good. Now, what I'm looking for is two things here. From the Outlook.com demo, I'm looking for what color it is. So in this case, I can look at the computed style, which simply says, okay, these are all the colors that are happening and positions and widths and so forth. Or I can scroll down and just simply look at what they've got going on here. So I can see for the blue, they're using this certain 0072C6, and for this gray, for this background, they're using this gray, that's F0F0. So I'm going to grab this color here and simply apply it. Now, I need to also figure out what it is. Now, I don't have to, Firefox's tools are pretty good as well. I've got it in a separate window here. I can dock it as well. But in this case, what I'm looking for is what particular area this is. Now, it's telling me this is the side pane content wrapper. That's what I want to apply the color to. So let's go look for that area in here. Now, in this demo, and I'll explain the difference between themes and styles and so forth in a minute. But in here, we've got styles.css. Now, when I open it up, we can see we've got some background colors, fonts for the body, and the very first one is the side pane content wrapper. But you see we've got a lot of styles for the contacts and so forth. So what I'm going to do is the side pane content wrapper, I'm simply going to apply a background color to it, and we're going to set it to that gray. Now, before we, well, okay, let's take a quick look at this, all right? And I'm just going to hit Shift F5. Oops. Firefox likes to do it a little bit differently. Shift F5 brings up their profiler, so Control F5 will refresh it. I want to make sure that it goes in case it's cached any of the styles. So just by making that simple change, we're already that much closer to the sort of the look, right? We've got the gray. Now to get the blue, I want to make sure that I got the right blue. So I'm just simply copy this 00672C6, and I want to figure out what section they apply it to here. So in our case, we've got this navigation toolbar, right? So when I click on this navigation toolbar, it's highlighting this area. Okay, well that's great. So what about this area? I need to make sure that area is done as well. And in this case, we've got a action toolbar. So navigation and toolbar and action toolbar is the two areas I want to apply that background color to. All right, so I'm going to go back to my style here and look for navigation toolbar. Oh, and there it is. And what I find is action toolbar and navigation toolbar share certain styles. And that's great for me because now I can simply apply it here. So I'm going to say background color for both of those is going to be this blue. And just like that, you know, I can refresh this page now. And we get this background blue. All right, so let's take a quick look at this. Now, we're pretty close there, right? One of the key things that stands out to me is that the fonts are different. We're using a Verdana, and you know, knowing Microsoft, they're in love with Segoya UI. In fact, Segoya is such a great font. I believe we use it on DevExpress.com as well. One of the things I can do is set up the font, and I'll show you how to do that. But what you'll also notice that now, in the previous design, those icons made a lot of sense. But now in this design, these icons kind of stand out, and they don't look so great, right? So how do we do that? How do we change around these icons? So let's address that. The first thing is, how do we change around the fonts? Well, the first thing we want to do is I want to figure out what fonts they're using, right? So I'm going to inspect the element here, and I'm going to just take a look at the computer styles. And here in the font family, they're using Segoya UI, Helvetica Neue, and a bunch of other ones, Arial, sans serif, and so forth. So I want to use a similar set of fonts. So I've got a set of fonts here that starts with Segoya UI, and I'm also going to use a different size altogether. So let's go back to our styles and change around the default font. So instead of Verdana, Geneva, and sans serif, I want to remove those and use Segoya, Helvetica Neue, Arial, and so forth. And I'm going to change the default size to 14. Now, when I change this, this is applied. Now, if I go and refresh this page, you might say, well, oh, great, Mehul, did you change all the fonts? Well, let's see. I did change the fonts for the body. So if I had a standard div, it would apply that. You might be going, oh, but the font didn't change on the preview or the grid. What happened, or the menu here? Well, what happens is, one of the things that DevExpress Controls gives you, it gives you the capability for cross-browser compliance. Meaning, when this product is run on Firefox on Linux or Chrome on Mac, it's going to look exactly the same. It's going to behave the same. You ask anybody that's been working on the web, that is not an easy feat. We are super proud of this fact, right? So what that means is that, you know, that there's a font property that's applied to these things, right? So, you know, I am very aware of things like less and sass out there, and we're looking at some ways we might improve this story. For now, I would suggest that if you want to change fonts, we can just apply that font family directly to these controls and get that same effect, right? Now, to do that, we're going to go back to the default ASPX, and if we take a look, we've got a tree view, and we've got this grid. Now, for the grid, I'm going to look at the properties here. Let's go back to the standard properties. If we scroll up, we'll find that there's a set of font properties here. So I can, for example, set it to 14 pixels, and set the names up to those names that I defined earlier. So now let's go to the source view and see what exactly we did here. So here I've got font names that we've font names and font size that we set. Now I'm going to take that exact same statement and apply it to that tree view we've got on the left-hand side. And I can go ahead and do this for the menu as well. Now the menu is inside of a couple of user controls. So we've got the action toolbar, and I can set this up for the menu. Yeah, looks like I overloaded VS a little bit. Let's give it a second to catch up. Now while it's doing that, I can refresh this. All right, so we can see simply by updating our fonts that we're also closer now to the same fonts they're using. Now, while VS is refreshing, the next thing I want to focus on is these icons, right? These icons, you may be wondering, first of all, where are they? How do I change them, right? So if I right-click on in this and inspect the element, we're going to see that this icon, it has a class called Sprite New Mail. And if you see something called Sprite, that should give you a clue that it's probably using a Sprite image. Now, what are sprites? If you're not familiar with sprites in CSS, sprites are a way to get better performance out of a site. So rather than delivering and having this website request an icon from here, 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 all the different icons that are on the site, rather they're all put into one larger image that saves a bunch of requests to the server, and CSS is used for positioning. So CSS says, hey, this is located on one image and it's located at this position. Just go and grab it from that portion of the image. So it's actually showing one image, but it's using CSS. So it gives you a tremendous advantage. And DevExpress products themes use CSS by default. So to modify these images, I'm going to show you how to do that to the styles. All right, so let's go back. I'm going to close this here and save it. Let's look at the content here. Under content, we looked at the styles, but you'll see there's also this sprite PNG. So let me open up the sprite PNG to show you the image. So this is one image. This image contains all the images that are used by this. Now, if we look at the associated CSS with this, we'll see that it defines the CSS tag, and the CSS tag defines exact location and the height and width of that image. So to change around, we simply need to change around these icons in here. All right, so I'm going to show you that you don't actually manually have to do this yourself. If you had to, that would be a lot of work, right? Instead, there's a much easier way to do that. There's websites, there's tools on GitHub you can use to do this, and I'm going to show you exactly how to do this. So when I wanted to change this, the first question I had to ask myself is, what do I want these icons to look like? So I said, okay, well, I want to use sort of Metro style icons. So I went to Google and I just said, okay, Metro UI icons is something I searched for. And it brought me to this website called Modern UI Icons. These guys have, for you, made these icons, and they made them available for free. Now, you can use them actually as SVG vectors, right? Meaning that you can simply make a call in your things. Now, they've kind of done it sort of for the mobile approach for Windows Phone and stuff, but you can use it in a site as well. And they've got all these different styles. Now, I knew, for example, that I had to find icons for the different things that we have in our site. So, for example, I needed an icon for compose, for print, for themes, and for help. So what I did was I just searched around this thing and I would type something like print, and it would find me for a print icon, or help, and it would find me this icon, right? The more difficult one was when I said theme, and I said, oh, well, I didn't really find anything for theme. So I said, well, it's kind of like settings. So let me see settings. Oh, settings has this icon. Okay. And then but the tough one was really, how do I find an icon for a plus and a circle? And then I noticed they had a plus and a circle, but they didn't have it together. So they have one for add and they have one for base. So what I did was I said, well, first of all, I won't be able to use them as SVG vectors because I've got them as images in my solution. So what I did was the good thing is they made these available as icons. So I downloaded this icons file and I saved it. So I will show you that once you download this and it extracts into this Windows icon master. And if we look under Windows Phone and we look under, they have light versions, right, or dark versions, which tend to have this other approach. So I opened basically this file up in paint.net. So if I just right-clicked on this file here and I said open with paint.net. Now you don't have to use paint.net. So for example, I just like it because one, it's free and it's very powerful for Windows. If, for example, you're a Photoshop guru, that you can use Photoshop as well. So I'm simply going to let me close around a couple of these things. So here we've got that plus sign, and it's got a transparent background. And then I had to find the base appbar.base. Now I could have used this other circle one, but I wanted to use this one. And what I did was I simply dragged this image and dropped it on top of this image. And paint.net is nice because hey, do you want to open it as a separate image or do you want to add a layer to this? And I said I want to add a layer. And just like that, I was able to get my circle with the plus together. The only problem is right now it's 76 by 76. And most of the icons on our website are much smaller. So if we take a look at the Sprite CSS, and I'll take a look at new mail, it is 32 by 32. So I can't have a giant image because it's going to be too large. So what I did was I just simply went to image and resize, and I just said, okay, let's go 32 by 32. And paint.net is really good at resizing as well. And I simply then I save these with the same name. So right now they've got these names like appbar.image and so forth. And so what I went to was I went and called it something and saved it as just different images. So I called it new mail, help, print, and theme. Because I have all these images. Now generally when you make a sprite you have all the images to begin with. So I had these images and I just replaced the standard one. So the regular one's still there for like new contact, right? New contact is this other style, but the new mail, it's going to use this new one that we just saved it as. And what I needed now was to recreate the sprite and the PNG. So to do that, I've got a little utility here that does that for me. So what I can do is I can open a command window and simply run this sprite. So I can actually run it as admin as well here. And when I do that, it simply just runs a command script. Now you might be wondering, where do you get this file? So I've got this thing called Sprite Creator. As I mentioned, there's a ton of these out there on the web. Amanda, can you post for me those 2 websites that I recommended yesterday? There's a couple of websites where you can actually upload these images and it'll generate this PNG and CSS for you as well. So once you have these images, what you can do is simply bring them in. So I'll post this modern UI icons into the chat as well. And those links that Matt just posted, the SpriteGen, websiteperformance.org, and css.sprite are really useful as well. So let's go back and close this, resize this, and what I need to do is I need to replace the 2 items, right? So let's replace sprite.css and PNG. I'm going to delete these 2 and add new items inside of Visual Studio. I'm sorry, add existing items inside of Visual Studio so it copies them over. So the first thing is I need to browse to that directory and show all files, because I need to bring in both the sprite.css and the image, the PNG. So we can see that these icons that we can't see here very well got replaced. Those are the new icons. Now, as you can see, I didn't replace all the icons. If I'm going to change around to a new set of icons to go Metro style, I want to make sure that I do it for all the images. Since this is a demo, I didn't want to take up too much time, but essentially you want to make sure that if you're going to go for a certain look, that you go for the whole look. All right, so let's add that in there. All right, just by doing that, and I don't really need to recompile or anything. As a force of habit, I like to. But what's more important is if I refresh right now, these icons may not appear. And that's because what happens is CSS and PNGs, they tend to get cached. Now, as you can see, our icons didn't really update here. So what I want to do, even though the CSS got updated, the PNG has been cached. So I want to hit Control F5 and tell the website, go and refresh all the assets for this site. And it's done that. So now, just like that, we were able to get our look much closer to the look over here. Now, the next thing I may want to focus on is, for example, the height of this toolbar here. And I would do it the same approach. I would simply look at what element that is, find out where the height is, and just simply reduce that from the styles. The next thing I want to focus on is that here, there's a big glaring difference between this icon and this icon. Now, I may want to try and go get this icon. Obviously, you want to be careful. You don't want to steal somebody's icons. You want to make sure that you have a license for them and so forth. And by the way, DevExpress, every icon, every image, everything we provide in our demos, you are completely free to use. We encourage you to use them, and then show me the link where you used it. I love to see it when customers are making sites based on our demos. We put a lot of hard work in those demos, so I'm happy to see when customers find good use out of them. So in our case, this has now become sort of a little bit glaring. Yellow on blue doesn't really go, and that was another thing Mark suggested, is that, look, you want to make sure that the colors of the site match. This is now drawing my attention. The eye is reduced here. Now, if I look at this element, you'll notice that this too is using a sprite image. If we look at this for the sprite mail, though, we may not find it in our styles.css, right? I'm sorry, in our sprite.css, right? And that's because, and the easiest way to tell is, do you see that yellow mail icon in this PNG? We don't, right? And the reason is, and I'll show you why, is when we change this theme. So if I go to Metropolis Blue, what happens is this image changed, right? And this one fits a little bit better. It's still, in fact, in the original image, there's actually a blue, which it matches the blue background that we have here. So this white tends to work, but really it's not exactly. So the clue that I want to give you is that when I change this theme, that image changed. And the reason is because we've got a certain, with each theme, that image is being changed. So we can conclude that that image is coming from a theme, right? So to get to that image, we can look at the themes that are embedded in here. So if you go to App Themes and we look at Metropolis, and I'll look at this PNG, voila. Here's that yellow icons. Now, in this case, what I can do is I can open that PNG in Paint.net, right-click, select a different hue from that blue that we have on our site, and pick a similar hue or something close to it, and maybe color it blue as well, right? So I would suggest that that's something that you may want to focus in on. Let me see. I may have one that I've already prepared before. Not that one. I was playing around quite a bit with this site, and I was having a lot of fun. So I did change around a couple of these. Let's see. I believe it could be this one, Metropolis, and the PNG. Okay. So, sorry, I don't have it handy. I don't want to bore you too long. But essentially, that sprite is easy enough to change. So, let's close that. Let's close this style. One last thing I would suggest is that let's go to the default ASPX, and this goes to sort of the data aspect of the information. We could use the designer for this as well, Um, I tend to not like the attachment icon so far to the left. I would probably place it closer to the date, maybe just before the date. So the date icon in this case is set for 3. So what I want to do is actually set it this to 2 and change around some of the other properties, or maybe just change it to, for example, like actually we can do this easier through the design view, because the design view gives us sort of a columns editor. So let's use the columns editor, because simply we can use some icons to move it up and down. So when I click on the smart tag, I get this thing for the columns, and I can simply move this down to just before date, click OK. Let's go back to source view, save everything, and refresh our page. Let's also go to Metropolis Blue in this case, just that tends to be a little bit more familiar. Okay, so just like that, we've updated the icon as well. Oops, actually it didn't take our icon. It did move the icon down, however, visible index 3, 2, 1. All right, let's refresh that again. All right, so it just wasn't properly refreshed. All right, so now we can see that this data also, we've gotten rid of that little bit of extra space, right? So for example, selection is useful. I would definitely keep selection here, because it allows the end users to select rows, delete them, or mark them as read or unread. But I didn't, the attachment isn't so important to me. The attachment, I could, if I wanted, have that image be attached right to the back of the subject line, right? Or maybe right at the front of it, right? But it tends to take a certain amount of space that is not as important for me. So I'm pretty happy with this look overall. And as I said, I've gotten closer. The other thing Mark mentioned that I kind of want to put out there that I think is useful is that you want to have contextual help. So in this case, when I mouse over this button, it tells me, oh, that's the compose. Oh, this is print. This is, theme. This is help. So having those little things, and these are just properties of the control that you can set. They're built into our controls. Very easy to set. So I highly recommend that you actually add those as well. So with that, we are finished. And by the way, let me add, if you're asking, hey, Mahul, that's great, but how do I get started with this stuff? The DevExpress website, if you haven't seen it in the last year, we've done a ton of great work to help you get started. So if you go to devexpress.com, if you click on products, ASP.NET, and MVC, and then click on getting started, if you haven't seen this page, that's fantastic. In fact, if you hire a new dev on the team and you want to get them up to speed, this is a great place to start. This is like a ton of work we put in. Amanda, myself, and our other video production crew, we got together, we put our heads together, and we produced a set of videos for you that are just great and take you from beginning all the way to deployment for a new ASP.NET site. And this getting started bit, it's kind of almost like something you'd see on Pluralsight or something. It walks you through even from getting started with the grid and all the other ASP.NET products. It's got links to technical demos, documentation, code examples. So I won't bore you, because all that stuff in there is fantastic. I highly, highly recommend it. And the file new templates in DevExpress are fantastic. So I'm just going to show you real quick. If I was to do file new project, we've got this thing called a template gallery, and in this template gallery is a way that says, look, I want an MVC project. No, I want a web form project. Whatever it is, what language are you using, what version you're using, if you have multiple versions installed, what platform you're on. This one template gallery takes care of all that. If you want an empty project, if you want an Outlook inspired project like with the one we just worked on, or a tablet application, or even just a standard web application, right? What that might look like. So when I run this wizard, it gives me this other wizard that says, look, you know what, I appreciate that you give me this layout, DevExpress, but I don't need a left nav bar, or actually I don't need anything in the menu. But in the client area, I don't want a grid view, I want maybe a scheduler, or the footer, I want a menu in the footer, right? It lets you do all that. It lets you choose a base theme if you want the black class, or iOS, or Metropolis, or something like that. So it's got all of the goodness built in. You know, we enable the compression settings, performance settings by default. But for example, if you're using IIS, you probably don't want this compression setting because IIS has its own compression setting, right? But if you haven't turned it on, you may want to turn it on. So all of this is available. And lastly, we've got a bunch of localizations. So if you've got customers in Germany and you know, in the countries that require Spanish or Japanese, all that stuff is available as well. All right, so with that, I am concluded. If you got questions, let's talk about them. I love talking to customers, so Amanda, I hand it back to you.
Hey, Mehul, some questions came in throughout your session. When you were doing changing the system time, Vlad asks, it's assumed that the time has been changed on the server, but will the same code work if the user changes the system time on their own machine?
Yes, because what happens is I was running at localhost. So for example, let me show you the webmail client. So for example, this date time wouldn't get affected at all, right? Because this is running on the server, right? The server is what's rendering the date and time, right? So it's not you're deciding from the server side how to display this e.display text, remember? And that's one of the advantages. Now, if this was a client-side technology, and I had said that this is dependent on what's on the client side, then yeah, that one would be dependent on the client side information. And you can do that with ASP.NET as well. So I could have taken that humanized JavaScript library and said, hey, let me evaluate this on the client side. There's a lot of client-side functionality available from DevExpress. You know, I tend to like to do it on the server side for certain type of functions, but some other functions make more sense on the client side. So, for example, like data operations tend to work faster on the server side. For example, rendering based things you may want to try on the client side. So it just really depends. But to answer the question, this particular case, no, it wouldn't affect it. If you really want, I can adjust the date and time again to show you. For example, let me just change it to August 12th. Now, when I refresh this, you'll notice that, actually, let me do this. Because this is running on the server side, these dates won't get affected at all. All right, so let me change my time back. What's the next question?
From Jeff, any chance of a webinar on the theme builder?
Jeff, you know what? Sure. Actually, I think the theme builder is deserves its own full thing. So let me bring up the theme builder real quick for people who haven't seen it. It's installed, and it's installed with it's another DevExpress tool that comes with an installation. But rather than, and I didn't want to run through the theme builder, right? So I'm just going to, actually, you know what? I've got it open here on this other window that I want to show you. Hold on one second. Let me bring it over. All right. When the theme builder first comes up, in fact, let me show you. I've got to resize for this webinar, so this thing tends to want to be larger. All right. So here's the theme builder product. It's really a great way. So those things that I showed you for changing fonts, you probably, if you're going to do that, you don't want to just apply it. If you, in fact, you do a bunch of things to the controls, you want to create your own theme. And the way you do that, in fact, let me run this again. You know, I've got this little launcher, launchy.com, I think it's called, theme builder. Yes. All right, so when you first launch it, this is what comes up. and it says, hey, do you want to create a new theme from scratch, or you want to open a theme for editing? So what I recommend is you actually open an existing DevExpress theme, right? Actually, you know what? I'm sorry. You want to create a new theme based on one of the DevExpress themes. So let's say I like the default theme or the Metropolis theme or the Glass theme, right? Let's just say Glass, and let's just say I want to do it for all the controls, right? I'll open up this theme, and what it'll do is it'll bring up the controls. Right here is showing me the callback panel. Now, this is really useful and important because this is what helps ensure that if you are going for cross-browser compliance, that you get that same you'll get that same capability. So let's say when we changed it for the grid view, excuse me, that I want to make sure that I change the grid view information here. So let's say I don't like this particular blue, or I don't like this icon, or I want to change around the font for it. When I click on this area, it gives me everything for this area. For example, the CSS that's going to be applied to it, what the border margin is, everything. And I can change this on the fly, and it tells me exactly what those elements are, what they will look like. And as I said before, this definitely, Amanda and I will discuss a way we can show you a good story on how to create your own theme. But to be honest with you, it is not hard. If you go to help.devexpress.com, we've got this all displayed out there that you can, documented out there, so you can shows you exactly what to do, how to create your own assembly, and once it creates the assembly, how do you incorporate that assembly into your own product, into your own project. And it's really a couple of steps. It's super simple. You won't believe how easy it is. But doing that approach is a good way to get at making your own assembly, and then essentially it will show up under app themes. That assembly will be in your references in your bin folder. What's great is, though, you now have your own theme, right? You don't have to rely on DevExpress themes if you don't want to. You've got them for whichever one. So if you've got a standard look that you use for your company, that will be available for everyone out there. You can simply say, hey, this is the general look that we use. And that theme builder is just a tool we put out there to help you do that. Bradley, you know what? Bradley, I have to say, is right on the money. He caught an error that I saw as well. So, I will say we have some fantastic devs. They tend to overlook some of the minor details of spelling. Of course, I wouldn't say it's minor. Spelling is a huge part of it, and we'll get it fixed. Thank you, Bradley. I appreciate it.
You mean grouped isn't spelled with 2 P's?
No.
Let's see, there's another. How do you hide the sidebar if you don't have enough real estate? From Craig.
Good question. You mean the splitter? So I'm going to assume that it's the splitter that he's talking about, right? So what I recommend is that if you look at this demo, Craig, and I hope if you're talking about Visual Studio, they just have these little auto hide pinning things, right? Which I doubt that he's asking about. I'm pretty sure he's asking about the demo here that says, look, if you run out of real estate, boom, just collapse it as well, right? And what's happening there, Craig, is that we are simply we've got some JavaScript that is looking for that information, right? And you can find that in our, I believe it's the root master, and it's just simply part of the initial text, right? So it's done a couple of ways, right? So first is you want to set up this viewport helps you set up what the main content bit piece is, but the piece that says, hey, splitter, I want you to collapse, is in something else altogether. All right, so let me show you. It's under scripts, and I believe it's under demo. Let me find that little bit of code, and I will get back to you. Right, so I believe it's client layout splitter. Okay. So there's a client-side event that says When the pane on the splitter is resized, and this is a client-side event, then it calls this other function here, right? So if you simply look in the solution for this, you'll find that in the demo.js, it calls this function that says when it is resized, then we want to okay. So there's a couple of functions that we use, okay, and you can find code for these, but we have created our own sort of client side because we do a lot with the client side controls. For example, we have one for client side touch, and for we've got one general one called client side utils that helps us get the client width, meaning how wide the browser is. And if it is, then we set the minimum desktop landscape size. That tends to that tends to collapse that splitter. So if that doesn't make sense, we can dig into this more. If you're interested, I would simply look into some of the script files that are delivered. Now, these are, if you've got the enterprise version of our code, these are available. So, for example, I believe it's under program files, program files x86, DevExpress, DExperience, sources. And here you can find all the different sources for the stuff that we do for web and the script files and so forth that's going on. So if you're really interested, you can obviously, because it's JavaScript, you can inspect the element and then see what script is delivered down the pipe. We do tend to obfuscate it, meaning that, you know, to save space and so forth. But essentially, my suggestion to you is if you really want to understand it, just email me and I'll sort of walk you through. I'll send you a couple of links that explain how this is done, right? That essentially is done with some CSS3 queries that says, okay, get the client width, and it is, then we tend to send a couple of calls, but there's essentially just client calls. So I apologize, Frank. I know I didn't. I'm sorry, Craig. I didn't explain it very well, but it tends to be a little bit more involved. Shoot me an email. I'd be happy to explain it to you, or send you a couple of links that explain that a little bit better. Or you can obviously go through this demo a little bit more.
All right, from Vlad again, he was asking earlier if it was possible to use custom fonts.
Yes.
And is it necessary to be the administrator? Or his two questions.
The administrator thing that you see here, I tend to run, so Visual Studio, in the old days, you had to run it as administrator. And then they said, no, we fixed that. What I found, and this is just a tip I'll give you, right? You don't have to run it as administrator. I tend to run Visual Studio Administrator because I found that when I go to design mode, it tends to work a little bit better. It tends to work a little bit faster for some weird reason. I don't know why. I haven't figured out why. But it's not necessary. Things will still work just fine. As far as custom fonts, sure. Just make sure your clients have those fonts, right? Because generally they may not have those fonts initially. So what I recommend is you may want to look at the Google fonts, right? Google. They have a bunch of fonts that are available out there that you can reference via CSS. And you know, you can incorporate any of these in there, right? So they make it a little bit easier to use some of these, and some of them are more open sourced and et cetera, et cetera. So just be aware that if you do use, let's say, you know, XYZ font, and your client doesn't have it, that you have a default back to something like Arial or sans serif or something like that that is installed in that browser, so that, you know, that text is displayed properly. Otherwise, it's going to look odd.
Okay, from Jamie, why on contacts and calendar does the view state equal false?
Why on contacts the view state equal false? I'm not sure exactly where it's referenced to, but let me answer the general question about view state equals true or false, right? This is a choice. View state was introduced back in the old days of ASP.NET. It's a web forms thing. These days, it's not really necessary. It's necessary for certain things. For example, if you're going to be doing a lot of back, or your customer is going to be using the back button, view state tends to come in handy. There's other ways to save state these days as well. My general feeling is that if you don't need view state, don't enable it. It is enabled on our controls by default, but you can turn it off. You can turn off view state on our controls. It's not just set view state equals false, right? Obviously, every action and decision you make will have a consequence, right? So, be aware that just turning it off doesn't necessarily mean that, oh, I've got, some performance enhancements and so forth. Before you jump on anything that says, hey, this is better for performance, or somebody out there on a blog says, I did XYZ and I just got this, right? Always take it with a grain of salt, right? Measure it for yourself first, right? So I'm not sure if he's talking about view state equals false for this context, or view state equals false for anything particular here. But in essence, if we made a decision to enable something for false, or we have this thing called render mode equals light, generally we'll tend to favor things where performance is better, obviously, and that's just a thing. But the other thing is, these are line of business applications. Your customers want you to provide functions and features that help them get their job done, analyze data, right? Your customers aren't necessarily going, hey, make my website as fast as google.com. I mean, if you look at google.com, Google's purpose for google.com isn't to provide you functionality. Google is a one-trick pony. The only thing they care about is search box. That's it. They don't care about anything otherwise. So, for example, there was a big blog post that when Google had to change and add some text on this page, that they said, okay, well, what text can we get rid of, right? They're focused on those kind of things, right? So if you go to their developers thing, their developers are all talking about performance from the perspective of less is more, and absolutely less is more. But if your customers are only doing one thing, good. Don't show anything other than the one thing that they have to do. But if your customers have to do things like, they have to analyze hundreds of thousands rows of data that they make decisions on, well, that's completely different, right? So make sure it's contextual, right? If what your website needs to do is based on that information. So anyways, I hope that answers the question. And by the way, I just have to say, you guys are the best audience out there. These questions are so great. I love them. And thank you for sticking around. Like I said, I'll stick around as long as you want. But yeah, if you have more questions, like I said, this was the best webinar that I've been on this month. So thank you very much. More questions, Amanda?
Yeah, there's a couple. One about XAF. At what time will XAF also have the new Metro style for ASP? Will
Lars,
XAF have it?
yeah, great question, Lars. Yes, our goal, absolutely. XAF, if you know the team lead, his name is Dennis. I love Dennis. He's such a smart guy, so giving. He loves the stuff that we're doing in the ASP.NET team. The XAF team uses all our stuff. XAF tends to be a step behind, and here's why. They have to ensure that the things that are in XAF, that they work a certain way, meaning that it fits those business models and so forth, right? So I'm not going to try to answer this question directly, other than to say that it will eventually probably come down the pipeline. Whenever we have a theme that we introduce, those guys are on it. Those guys are going, okay, well, let's see how we can fit it into sort of the timeline of things that we want to do and put out there. So I would say 95% chance that it's coming down the pipe, knowing that. I would send that question directly to the XAF team. But yeah, I would say that more than likely it's something that they're thinking about and working on.
Mehul, you may have addressed this, but from Frank, is there a place where we can find the CSS for all the controls?
The themes is probably what you're asking about, right? So each theme is available. Now, that theme builder that we brought up, Yes, that tends to have it. Actually, Frank, that's a okay. So let's talk real quick. I want to just make a quick point. We did this thing where we used to package all the themes in here, right? But that's not always efficient because, uh, in fact, let me bring up that other project real quick. Recent. In fact, let me show you this project. Um, Bruno Turkle is writing an MSDN article, and him and I got together and made this little sample for San Francisco crime stats, and it's based on one of the DevExpress templates, right? But anyways, in here we don't see app themes. We're like, okay, well, how's that possible? But if I go to a theme and I change this to Metropolis, bam, it's changed. Or Office 2010 blue, right? Let me just run this. It's going to just simply update. Well, how's that done? Well, on the fly, DevExpress, there's an assembly that we have referenced in here that says when they need to, this ASPX themes, we're going to deliver that on the fly. Why do we do that? It's more performant. It's faster than going, hey, include a bunch of this information in here, right? So we got Office 2010 Blue, but if we don't want that, we can simply go and say, let's change this to Metropolis, right? And rather than redeliver a bunch of assets and so forth, it's just more performant to deliver it via the themes, right? So now, when I refresh this page, it's going to give me the Metropolis look. And you saw how quickly that updated, right? And by the way, this thing has like, what is it, 20,000 rows? Man, I love this thing, right? This thing is says this database comes from it's a public database from one of the gov sites, but it actually shows crime incidents in the San Francisco. So you can ask questions like, which district had the most incidents, and what time of day did they occur, and so forth. So for example, we can see Mission District had a lot, and they tend to occur a lot on Saturday. So maybe I want to avoid the Mission District on Saturday. Who knows, right? And maybe we can even find out, what type of incident it was, right? Oh, burglary, assault. Might get assaulted on Saturday night in Mission District. So, anyways, this is just the functionality provided by the grid. I'm always a big fan of it. But anyways, where are they located? In the app themes in that sources folder I showed you earlier. C, program files x86, DevExpress, DExperience 13.1, sources, DevExpress.web.themes, app themes, and here they all are, right? So there's Aqua, there's all the skin files, and there's all the images and all that good stuff, okay? Sprite, style, CSS, MPNG, all that good stuff is right there. So knock yourself out. And like I said, if you don't have Enterprise, get Enterprise. It's totally worth it. You get priority support, all the sources, and all that good stuff. So I hope that answers the question.
Cool. And there's just one more, again from Jamie, about the asking about what's faster with the email demo, Link SQL Entity Framework or XPO?
Oh, all right. So link to link. Let's first make a quick definition, right? Link is a data query technology. It is not necessary. I won't say not necessarily. It is not a data access technology. Link to SQL is a data access technology. Link, L-I-N-Q, is simply, if you look at language integrated query, it's just a set of features that extend the query capabilities for ORMs, right? So you can use link to different things. So link to SQL gives you the data access analogy. Now, if you're asking what's faster, link to SQL or XPO, XPO tends to be faster, and we used to have a demo. I think we got rid of it. In fact, you're probably not going to like me, but today I'm going to get together with someone, and we're going to go through a lot of these demos. We're going to actually trim down and make these demos better, right? But in this grid demo, if you look at actually the technical demos, we moved them down here. We had a grid demo. I think we removed it. It was under here. Okay, this one is via link. Um, okay, actually, it's right here. So if you look at this demo, we've got this one that says link server mode. This link server mode uses XPO. This uses link to SQL, right? And if you do the comparison between the two, you'll notice that this tends to be just a little bit slower. The reason is we've got hooks into the grid with our XPO that tends to be a little bit faster. This is less than a second, right? So what we wanted to show you, number one, is choose your poison, whichever one you prefer, right? If you're like, no, we're a link to SQL shop, we don't want to use XPO, hey, knock yourself out. We love link to SQL as well, right? I tend to use it for a lot of demos. But if you're like, no, I want to get the most performant thing out there, hey, XPO. And you can use them side by side. There's nothing that says you can't use them side by side, right? That's a great thing about XPO. So I hope that answers the question. Oh, and just to, Jamie made a quick comments like, hey, why don't we use more XPO? You know, the world is a vast place. And Jamie, if everybody had your wisdom and insight, you know, they would go, yeah, let's completely use XPO, right? XPO has been around longer than most of these ORM technologies like Link and so forth. It's bulletproof. It lets you work with a ton of different databases. But, you know, developers have different requirements, and maybe for some people XPO might be, you know, they might look at it, sometimes people look at it like, oh, it's too complicated, and it's really not. It's super simple, as you know, right? If you look at our getting started stuff, we have a bunch of things in there that show you how simple it is. But honestly, we tend to favor the more Microsoft technologies because most developers know those, they understand those. We want to make the barrier to entry as easy as possible for our customers. And that's you. And if you first time you come to DevExpress, you might go, hey man, I love your grid, but I don't know what XPO is. I just came for the grid. Why do I have to use XPO, right? So we say, hey, you don't. Use standard SQL data source if you want. Use Access data source. We don't really care. We're at the UI layer. We want to provide you beauty, power, and functionality at the UI level, right? So, and then if you want to take it to the next level, then we say, yeah, we've got this great ORM product where you can put your business logic, et cetera, et cetera. So. And so thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Don. And oh, by the way, we've got Don Webier on this webinar, and he's a great DevExpress customer who's actually built a full-on DevExpress CMS, DevExpress-based CMS called CMS to Go. If you just Google for that, sorry about that. Yes, CMS to Go. You'll see that we've done a case study. He's done .NET Slackers, et cetera, et cetera. Just go check it out. That's the best way I can put it. But it's he uses all sorts of DevEx products, including it, and he's happy to talk with you, explain anything about it. That's him over there. And you know, you're like, what language is that? Honestly, I have no idea. No, actually, I do know. It's from the Netherlands. I don't want to. I'm just gonna stop while in my head and just say he's a smart guy, and show you my lack of European knowledge.
It's Dutch, man.
That was my next guess. Yes.
Oh, hilarious.
They speak like 3 languages over there. Okay.
Yes.
They speak a version of French over there. There's the version of German. So who knows? I'm just gonna say yeah. It's all good over there.
Awesome. Well, that looks like I think we got to all the questions.
Awesome. Hey, thank you very much. You guys are the best. Contact me, mehul@devexpress.com is the email. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, all that good stuff. So, yeah, love to hear from you. Thank you, guys.
Awesome. All right, everybody, you can visit devexpress.com/webinars for upcoming webinar sessions. What's coming up? We do have a What's Coming in XAF 13.2 webinar. It is next Tuesday, August 20th at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. It's presented by our CTO, Julian Bucknell, and members of the DevExpress XAF team, including Dennis, as Mehul was talking about him earlier. They're going to discuss the new features currently in development and that are expected to ship as part of our universal subscription version 13.2. And then on August 27th at 10 a.m., we have Introducing Test Cafe. It's our new functional testing for the web. Again, hosted by our CTO and members of the DevExpress Web Testing Tools team as we introduce Test Cafe and its revolutionary new feature set. It sets the standard for ease of use and flexibility. Web testing will never be the same again. And then on September 10th at 10 a.m., find your way with DevExtreme. In this webinar, Paul Usher, our technical evangelist, will show you how to create a multi-platform iOS, Android, Windows 8 application that takes control of the GPS and mapping. So that's what's coming up on webinars. And again, you can register for them at devexpress.com/webinars. All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks to Mehul for presenting. You can let us know your thoughts at webinars@devexpress.com, or you can email Mehul directly at Mehul. It's mehulh@devexpress.com, right, Mehul?
Yeah, I've done a couple of overloads like Mehul@devexpress.com, MehulH. Generally it's mharry@devexpress, but like I said, Mehul@devexpress. I should just get like WebGeek@devexpress or something, you know.
Just one. Or you can email me, amandac@devexpress.com. All right, everybody, again, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you soon.